Hi, and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today we're going to talk about Lucrezia Borgia. Usually it's just me, but today I have my cousin Charli with me. Hi, Charli.
Hey, so happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. This is going to be fun. Lucrezia Borgia is fun to talk about.
Yeah, I'm like Googling her right now.
Yeah, she's a fun time. So, Lucrezia Borgia was born on the 18th of April, 1480. Lucrezia was the daughter of a cardinal and his favorite, but not only mistress.
That's spicy.
Yeah, especially like you may know this, but cardinals aren't supposed to have mistresses or children.
Right? So my only knowledge of the Borgia family in general was the show The Borgias,
Yeah, it
and
was it
that
was
was
it was
wild.
probably pretty accurate. Like this
Really?
would be like peak corruption for the papacy. Probably is like when Rodrigo Borgia was in charge.
Yeah, that was intense.
Yeah, it would be right before the Reformation, and this is part of the reason why. It's because people were like, "Wait a minute. This isn't how we agreed to do things."
Hey.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to be honest. Like we have to decide at the end of this if Lucrezia Borgia was a huge part of that or if she was just more of a tool
Oh
for
dear.
all the men that were
Okay.
around her. So that's I guess the main question is whether or not she was a victim or a participant.
Could she have been, like, when you say participant, do you mean like an active member of whatever nefarious like
Yes.
shenanigans they were getting up to?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
was she going along with it happily? Like, yeah, let's do this. Let's take these people out. Or was she like, oh no, not again? Or somewhere in the middle, maybe on the spectrum. Like maybe she started to go with it and
Right?
then she's like, things got a little out of hand.
Maybe. Gosh. Yeah. Tell me a little more about her.
Okay. So this this was his only mistress to get her children legitimized. So this was his favorite mistress, and these were his favorite children because he had other children with other women, and they were not legitimized. And
That's
during this
rough.
time, approximately 40% of the legitimizing of bastards that the Catholic Church was doing, 40% were for clergy. So,
That's really awkward.
yeah, 40%. 40% was like this priest or this bishop or this cardinal or this pope has kids, and we have to make that okay.
And wow.
Yeah, that's a
That
lot,
that is a huge amount.
right? I mean, you hear about the kings, right, that do it all the time, but
Yes,
40% was
I
clergy.
that's it. That's bizarre. That's hard to
Yeah.
wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Although I heard a rumor one time and I was kind of like, "Meh, meh." I was like, whatever. But like I had heard somebody tell me sometime about like how a long time ago, land far, far away, probably Italy, that like nuns and like priests were like brown chicken, brown cow.
Yeah,
And like
yeah.
it was and like there were like you got into like the nunnery via birth or something, something where it was like, hey, like
Yeah.
how did
I mean,
like
not
that wasn't
always, but definitely like it was definitely part of the situation. Like people would just hand their babies over to the nunnery and be like, "Here, this one's a nun." And you'd be like 2 years old and you'd go to be a nun. So it wasn't like they had much choice in a lot of cases whether they were going to be a nun.
that's crazy.
They would just like grow up at the nunnery. And it was super common to give like your youngest child to the church. So like that whatever
Wow.
last child you had that survived would be a nun or a priest because you'd just be like, "Oh, well thanks to God that he let me have all these kids. I'll give him my
Here,
last one."
take I would have been in the nunnery.
Yeah. Yeah, you would have.
Like I would have
So
been
it's
like, see
Steph.
ya. We could have been together.
Yeah. Hopefully the
Wow,
same
that would have
nunnery.
been trouble.
Yeah.
That would not have been a well-running nunnery between the
No.
two of us.
I think it would have been so fun though.
100% yes. Now I'm like, okay, like no wonder things are like in flames. Like,
Yeah.
because I think, nowadays you think of going into like the priesthood or going into like the religion is like, it's a call, right? You like feel
Right.
called and you go, and it's like
And it
this whole
matches with your
thing.
personality and you're like you're fit for
Yeah.
it. Yeah, you're suited
And
for it.
you're like, it's like you choose it, right? Like
Right.
it's chosen, and like, and so like honestly, a lot of this makes sense
Yeah.
within the context of like you probably didn't get to choose that life and you're just kind of
Exactly.
thrust into it.
Yeah, like
Now,
this
I
is just
have a
who I am.
question.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, this kind of goes a little bit beyond Lucrezia,
Okay.
maybe into like just the world of like the papacy. My understanding is that at this time, like the papacy is also like a government, right? Like I know it
Yes.
functions similar. It's its own,
It's very
Vatican City to
powerful.
this day is like its own city. It's not aligned with a country. But like I think if I'm remembering correctly, this time in history, it's very, very closely intertwined. Like I'm thinking about like the kings of England and like how like, that they
Yes.
were, a hand of God. They were God incarnate. And so like
Yeah,
that's
this
am I
was
am I remembering
this
this
was
all
before the
correctly?
Protestant Reformation. So
Okay.
Protestantism
Okay.
was super minimal. It barely existed if at all. So Protestantism was like super in the wings and Catholicism was the main religion of Europe. And so
Yeah.
so many of the monarchs of Europe were Catholic that it was almost like a club. So
Yeah.
no one wanted to be kicked out by the Pope. So, like, if the Pope needed anything, for example, the Pope didn't really have like the most powerful army. But if someone tried to sack the Vatican, a lot of times other countries would come and be like, no, you can't do that. Like, the Pope's my guy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like the Pope was like the president of a super elite club that everybody wanted to be a part of in Europe. And he could just be
Man.
like, well, you're excommunicated and then you're kicked out. And that was real bad.
Yeah.
And this would be
It
during
was
the
just,
Crusade times. I mean, a little late. Like,
oh
Crusades were
wow.
way before this, too. Like, Crusades lasted hundreds of years at various points.
Hmm.
But, like, the Pope would just say, if you go on Crusade, free ticket to heaven. And people were like, I'm in. Like, I'm definitely going to do that. Like, if I die in Crusade, who cares? I'll be in heaven.
Right. Like bada bing, bada boom. Here
Yeah,
I
so
go.
he had a lot of power. And same with excommunication. He could be like, excommunicated, that means you're not going to heaven. So it
Yeah.
was a big deal.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, I have
Yeah.
to listen to this guy. He,
Yeah. So, okay, I am trying to ruffle the very recesses of my brain of when I
mhm,
went through confirmation
right,
way long time ago with the Lutheran Church.
right.
And like you learn about Reformation and you learn
Mhm.
about like the 95 Theses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's like right before, where Lucrezia lived. But is this also the time of where there were, I can't remember the right name. It's like on the tip of my tongue, but it's like where the Pope would issue or you could purchase like pardons? Is
Um,
that at this same time where it's like the corruption
yeah, I
of
mean
it's
there
like,
would be
oh,
like
you
papal
could,
bulls and yeah, the Pope could
okay,
basically say you're good for anything.
good for anything. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Get out of jail
okay.
free card. Yeah, and Lutheranism
Yeah.
started like in Germany and then it made its way out
Yes.
more into Europe whereas like Scotland was a lot more Presbyterian, but that's what started their Reformation. And
Hmm.
the Huguenots came from I believe Switzerland. John Calvin, the Calvinists, from Switzerland into like
Oh, yeah.
France.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so
It's so funny to me. Like, I always think of like Protestantism, that's the wrong verb or adjective or whatever, like as being like just like this blanket. But like, I forget that there's all like it's kind of interesting how these factions of
Yeah, it's like
individuals
a
that are
bunch of little
not
splits off like
happy.
a spider web. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like all like, "Hey, Catholic Church, we don't like what you're doing," and it kind of is all like with it's. Was it a domino effect or was it kind of like simultaneous where it's
It
like
was kind of
everybody
all
kind of
the
was like,
same time where they were like, I think I've
yeah,
had enough with this. This Catholic Church is a little out of control. And it was actually seen like I think now people see Catholicism as more like an ancient religion, more of a traditional.
mm,
But back
mm-hmm,
then, the Protestants were like, these Catholics are out of control. They're having all these illegitimate children. They're saying that's okay. The Protestants were the ones who were a little more strict. They
more.
were like, no dancing, no this, no that. So,
That's so funny. That's
yeah.
so funny how like things have those pendulum swings,
Yeah.
you
Like
know, of
the Puritans, they were Protestant. They were like
see, that's wild.
religious fanatics and they were like, Europe is too crazy. We have to go and be a little more buttoned up somewhere else.
These Catholics are too wild for
Yep,
us.
too wild.
We need to brave some whole new country.
But Catholicism has actually
Oh
stayed
man,
fairly consistent, like over the years, compared to Protestantism.
that's wild.
Yeah.
Like that's wild.
I mean, the core religious values have stayed the same within Protestantism, but like most Protestants, I think now are okay with dancing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I
But
think so. Like I'm
yeah.
like, I don't
And
know.
like in
Like,
Scotland, the Presbyterians, John Knox, he
mm.
hated women. He was like, women should basically sit down and shut up. Like, we don't need them to talk ever or be in charge of anything ever. The Presbyterians were like,
That's wild.
absolutely not. Like, women are for having babies and that's it.
Well, that's still present today
A little
in
bit,
some
yeah.
degrees. I
Yeah.
mean, like, for instance, like, there's factions of the Lutheran Church. I mean, I go to Episcopalian church right now, but like, there's factions of the Lutheran Church that are like, no to female ministers.
Yeah.
Like,
The
that's a
church I grew up
hard no.
in was no female ministers.
Yeah.
They could be
Like,
Sunday
and
school
I,
teachers, but that's
right, you
it.
could be a deacon or you could be, you could
Mm-hmm.
have some capacity.
Yeah.
But, and I remember being young. So that means it wasn't that long ago
Yeah. Yeah.
when the evangelical Lutheran Church started ordaining women.
Yeah.
And just recently, I want to say the Episcopal Church had like their first like female bishop.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. The church I grew
I'm
up
like,
in, women could not be preachers. Like, the most you could do is maybe, like, say a prayer at the beginning
yeah,
or, yeah, introduce a speaker or something or teach Sunday
hmm
school. Yeah.
yeah. That's just it's so wild to me. Like I'm like looking at the date on my computer. I'm like, yeah, it is 2024, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But it
Yep.
also, it makes me think of like all the things that I judge history about. Like I'm looking, oh, Lucrezia, Borgia, get your life together.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't you see what was going on around you? But like, I mean, we've lived through a freaking pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think about like the Plague and all the horrible illnesses that like swept through, like, and people survived and like
Yeah.
went on,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's
just a
like,
totally different world. I was doing an episode with one of my friends last week on Maria the First of Portugal. And
mm,
the 1755 Lisbon earthquake happened, and I told her that like people panicked. They didn't. There was holes opening up in the ground, like 15-foot wide holes, just opening in the
whoa,
ground. It was huge, and everyone just ran for the docks because it was open spaces. And she was like, "Weren't
yeah,
they worried about the water?" And I'm like, "Funny enough, they weren't." And then the ocean
yeah,
receded, and they were like, "Oh, that's scary. Like the world must be ending." Because we know
oh,
what that probably means, right? When the ocean recedes, is it's
yeah,
going to come back. But we know that because of things we've seen on the news or learned in science class, or they
yeah,
didn't have any of that. So they were just like, oh my gosh, the ground is opening up and the ocean is gone.
that's
And
so
they
wild.
didn't realize until 40 minutes later that the ocean was definitely coming back.
Definitely. Well, but like I'm thinking about that horrible tsunami that hit Japan,
Mm hmm.
at that area, like not too long ago.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I don't remember when, but like in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
right? It was
Yeah.
somewhere in there. Like it was a while ago, but not like ancient history. And I remember there being reports of people like wandering around on the beach and
Yeah.
like going out and picking stuff up.
Because the
Like, what's
entire
going on?
beach,
Like,
the ocean bed was empty. And like these people
yeah,
had, it was 1755. They'd never seen the ocean bed before. And
right,
there were
right, right.
shipwrecks and lost cargo and just stuff all over the place.
Right. But like you would think with like science and thing awareness today, but like people did the same thing in the early
Exactly.
2000s. Like
Exactly.
they just kind of were like, what is going
Which,
on?
funny is the reason I know about it is because I heard like the ocean receded and people were like, oh, that's weird. And then it came. So
Ugh.
that's why I know about it is that tsunami that happened in my lifetime.
Right. Like I genuinely, if I were somewhere, like, I mean, I'm not anywhere right now where a tsunami would hit, but like if I were to be like if the ocean all of a sudden started disappearing, I'd be like, let's
Yeah,
move.
let's go somewhere else. Yeah,
And
no,
let's go
that
fast.
tsunami destroyed the royal palace. The royal family wasn't home. They just got lucky
Wow.
it was a holiday and they decided to leave town for the day. So they got
Oh
lucky.
my
But yeah,
God.
it's just like if you don't have the internet and you don't have the news and you don't have even just basic science class, there's just so much that you wouldn't know.
Right.
And it would
Oh
make
yeah.
sense that people would believe in like magic and wizards and curses and
Oh,
evil spells and like, because why would your town just
100%.
open up and sink into the ground
Yeah.
unless you
I
had a really
mean,
powerful enemy?
right? I mean, just thinking about the horrible like hurricane that just hit. Like
Exactly.
oh, those poor people. Like, I mean,
Yeah. It's awful.
just stunningly awful. Like just the widespread like
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at some of those maps and like just
Yeah.
it's
So,
rough.
like, it's sometimes hard to understand what the people were thinking back then, but if you put it in the context of history, you're like, oh, okay, I could see how that would be difficult.
Yeah, or like it makes sense
Yeah. It
or
makes sense why the
like it
Protestants were like, okay, let's, because the Protestants weren't trying to come up with like a whole new religion. They were just trying to reform their religion. So,
they were essentially saying to the Catholic Church, you need to calm your titties.
yeah, yeah, these are all the
You
things we
got
have a
some
problem with. And these are the things we are choosing to do differently. And then things
because you
got
are
dangerous because they
messed
all
up.
started killing each other. But but yeah, we're reaching peak corruption of the Catholic Church. I would say this is allegedly. This is just my opinion. I feel
Yeah.
like Rodrigo Borgia becoming pope. I mean, his daughter was married at the Vatican. He walked her down the
Wow.
aisle. Like this was fully out. She was legitimate. She was the pope's daughter. And people were like, "This is not how we do things, I don't think."
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like just that is like being bold to the like
Yeah.
nth degree,
And
like to be like,
I don't
I'm
think
the Pope.
Rodrigo
Here's my daughter.
Borgia felt very bad about it. Like he wasn't one of the people who became part of the church when he was an infant. He didn't become
Mm,
well, he became cardinal at 25 years old, which I guess is relatively young to be a cardinal, but it's relatively old to still be unmarried. So, as an adult, he was definitely like this is my path. I'm going to go do this. Cuz at 25 he was like, yeah, I'll be a cardinal.
hmm,
And
interesting.
he was made a cardinal by his uncle, who was the pope. So it was full nepotism.
Full nepotism.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was
Wow. And
said to attract women with greater force than a magnet attracts iron. And I've seen his portrait. Okay, he's older in the portrait. So, he's a little heavier in the portrait. So maybe when he was younger, he was super hot. But maybe he
maybe.
was just super charismatic because I don't see it.
Right?
I don't see it at all. And granted, the
That is
portrait I
really
have of him,
funny.
he's much older. But like, I have a portrait of his son Cesare, and I mean, I don't know. I guess he's okay looking. I mean, he's not maybe my type. I don't know. He's not bad
Right?
looking,
Right.
but I imagine Rodrigo looks something like Cesare. I'm like,
Yeah.
he's
Like,
fine. Like, he's okay, but
yeah. Like,
stronger than a
oh,
magnet attracts iron. He was either
that's
very
intense.
hot or very charismatic.
Yeah, I think I just found a picture of him and that is not attractive.
Is he a
Like,
heavier, older looking man?
yeah, it's a profile.
Yep. That's the
Yeah,
exact
I'm
portrait
like,
I'm thinking of.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah. The
I
ladies
wouldn't be
loved
like,
him. Loved
I would,
him.
mm, I would not want to jump those bones. Like,
No.
no,
No.
no.
He's definitely not my type. But even his son Cesare, I'm like, I mean, he's okay looking, but I guess we have to remember this is back when like people had crazy deformities from like smallpox scars, and
Oh, wow. That's
so
true.
even something as simple as not having a face full of smallpox scars could maybe be like, oh, look at that. They have smooth skin, you
Right.
know?
Well, and something that I've also, okay, so I found Cesare and he is handsome.
Okay. Yeah, I mean he's a nice looking guy. I don't know that
He's a,
I would be
I
like
mean,
obsessed with it. I mean, I know more about his personality, so that might be coloring my view on him.
oh yeah. Yeah, I'm like, okay,
He's
like
not
I mean,
bad looking.
he's not bad looking at all. But like, I mean, if he favors his father,
Mhm.
I could see that. I
He
could
could
see that.
also favor his father's favorite mistress though, cuz she was probably fairly attractive
Oh,
too.
I mean, I would imagine. And
Yeah.
I heard somewhere that like for and it's like, it's probably I heard it on some social media somewhere, so it's probably nothing. But I heard somewhere that it's like women are more attracted to a personality versus men are potentially more attracted to a physical trait first.
Yes. And
Like,
power
like as like
helps.
right, right. Like, I mean, everybody talks about how like handsome somebody is in uniform, right?
Right.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
uniform. Like, so I feel like if he was a cardinal when he was that young, I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of attractiveness that goes into a uniform or a
Yeah.
position.
Well,
And
and
if he's charismatic,
accents.
that like, yeah.
He had an accent. He wasn't Italian.
Oh,
So I feel like
well,
accents do something to ladies sometimes.
they do a lot. Are
Yeah.
you kidding?
He was
They,
he was Spanish, so he had a Spanish
oh,
accent, and he was kind of from the area of Spain that was sort of known for being a little dangerous, being a little like they might
oh,
poison you or kill you if you mess with them too much. Like the dangerous Spaniards kind of.
okay.
So I think
See,
that maybe played into it too.
100%.
And he's a
Yeah,
25-year-old cardinal. So compared to the other cardinals, he was like the hot one, right? Like the young.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
that
that
makes
probably
sense.
had a lot to do with it because not very many people become a cardinal when they're 25.
Hmm.
If he's hanging out with
That
a bunch
is
of
really
50-year
young.
old men.
If you had to make your choice of
Yeah.
where you're going to make, I mean, your
Like,
move
which
for power.
cardinal am I going to bang? He's probably the one you go for.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I mean, goodness gracious.
And the portrait, he's much older. So at this point,
Yeah,
he's basically just doing whatever he wants at that point. So he's got, I mean, it's like Henry VIII, right? Like
yeah,
in his later years, he was similar. He was heavier and a little bit ill and older, and the women were still all over him, but he was attractive until he was around
mm,
40. He was fit
yeah,
and he was like a young 40.
yeah. Well, and like, I'm not sure when he died, but that like, or Henry, but like 40 is like so, I mean, shoot, I'm 41 right now, and I don't feel like I'm like on death's bed, but like at that time with so much, less
Yeah. I mean, you have to think about back
health
then that would
care
have been the
and like,
1500s when King Henry died. So we're talking about before King Henry. King Henry's not around yet,
yeah,
but if you think about any
mm,
medication that you take daily or weekly or monthly, or any
yeah,
medication you have in the past taken like that, or any antibiotics, or I mean, they didn't
yeah,
have any of that. So
none.
to be a young 40 back then was pretty impressive.
Right. Like, and that probably was a piece of the attractiveness as well.
Yeah.
Like beyond just like the physical, like,
Yeah.
lacking
Like,
of
oh,
like,
look, homie can
you
live
know,
to 40. That's
like
impressive.
that's impressive.
I
Look
want
at
my
you.
kids to
Like
be able to live to 40. That's an attractive
Right.
quality.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my
So
goodness.
while Rodrigo Borgia was a cardinal, Pope Pius II sent out a letter, and this letter exists. So this isn't a rumor. This letter actually got sent out, and it was chastising Borgia for attending orgies where he behaved, quote, as if he were one of the most vulgar young men of his age. So the Pope
And
wrote
it
this
went
letter, like,
out.
yep, like,
What did talk about, like, that's like the worst reply all
right,
ever.
right,
Like,
like, so here's the deal. Stop going to the orgies. Like, I heard you were the most disgusting person at the orgy, so that's a problem. You're a cardinal.
that's a oh my gosh.
And this might
Was
be
he embarrassed? Like, is there anything, like, is there any
no, not
evidence to,
really. He
like,
was just
how he
like,
responded? Yeah,
calm
okay.
down, boomer. Like, relax. And he was kind of like an okay boomer guy, I feel like. And later, the Pope sent another letter, and this could just be damage control, like, oh, that didn't look good. The Pope admitted to overreacting to gossip. So I don't know.
Um,
The Pope was like, sorry, I heard a rumor that you were at this orgy acting like a maniac. So I sent this letter out in anger. Sorry about that. So
sorry.
it's unclear, but also Rodrigo Borgia didn't seem to care. He was just like, whatever.
He was
Who
just like,
doesn't go to an
whatever.
orgy once in a while, right? Like,
Right. I mean, you just got to blow off some steam.
yeah, like Cardinal Smartnal. I like a good orgy sometimes. Hi, guys. You've reached the end of part 1, and this one turned out to be 4 episodes. So the other 3 parts are over on Patreon, and the link is in the show description. See you there.
Will be remembered.
Thanks for listening.